Wednesday, 1:13 p.m. Got called to the parade grounds on account of an attempted assassination of a foreign diplomat. All the clues around the scene tell us that the suspect could have only come from one place, a desert nation across the sea that Ankh-Morpork is currently at war with. We gave chase, but we lost him. Looks like we'll be going overseas if we want to clutch our bad guy. Yeah! Bah, bah, bah. Hi guys, and welcome back to the Library of Alexandria. And today, guys, I will be reviewing Jingo by Terry Pratchett. This is book 4 of the City Watch books, after Guards, Men-at-Arms, and Feet of Clay. If you have not checked out my reviews for those, by all means, go ahead and check it out. And if you're not reading Discworld, why are you not reading Discworld? Please read Discworld. Start with the Guards books. It's a great place to start. So, Jingo is... Pratchett has a way of writing really timely novels where the themes are still relevant today as they were back when he wrote it. I think this was 97 this book came out. Yeah, 97. And so this book is about war. It's called Jingo because it's about jingoism. And if you don't know what jingoism is like fanatical patriotism that often expresses itself as like extreme bellicosity, extreme warlike tendencies in nations. And that is definitely what this book is about. So, the central conceit of this book is there are two fishermen, and they're both out in the water in their rowboats with their sons, and one pair is from Ankh-Morpork, and another pair is from the nation of Clatch, which is right across the sea from Ankh-Morpork, and Clatch is just kind of a stand-in for the Middle East. And so, while these fishermen are fishing for what are called curious squid, an island that they call Lesh rises up out of the sea right under both pairs of fishermen, and they both claim it for their respective homelands. Not because they want it, just because they're like, oh, well, this is totally Ankh-Morpork, so no, this is totally Clatchians. And so war breaks out between the two nations, not because anybody wants this stupid spit of land, but because they don't want the other nation to have it. It's like your brother picking up a toy that you weren't planning on playing with, and you still don't want to play with it, but you certainly don't want him playing with it. And parents, I'm certain that you all know about that. I teach high school, and I see that cramp every freaking day. Now, where the City Watch comes in, one of the diplomats from Clatch has come over to Ankh-Morpork to meet with the Patrician to kind of discuss terms so that war doesn't necessarily have to break out. And during those negotiations, someone takes a shot at the diplomat. And so it's this big international relation, and Commander Vimes and the Watch, they end up following the clues onto ships and over to Clatch, and so we get out of Ankh-Morpork about a third of the way through. We're out of Ankh-Morpork, and we kind of see the world opens up a little bit. We see some of Clatch. We see like kind of how Clatch operates compared to Ankh-Morpork. How are they similar? How are they different? What does the police force in Clatch look like, and how does it differ from the City Watch in Ankh-Morpork? And so, just right off the bat, this book feels very different from the first 3 Guard books in the fact that we do leave the city. And so, what Jingo is trying to say at its core is Pratchett is kind of shining a lens on what happens when two nations declare war, and how do the populace of each of these nations react. We see a lot of this kind of blind patriotism, and this is a really timely thing that Pratchett is writing about here, because I teach classes on the ancient Greeks, and Thucydides during the Second Peloponnesian War writes a quote about blind and fanatical patriotism that could have been talking about politics today. You guys know politics is not about doing what's good for the country and doing what's good for the populace. Politics is about doing what's good for your party, and that's it. Whatever you need to do to stay in power, you go ahead and do it. That's modern day politics, because it's blind allegiance, blind idealism, blind patriotism, where it doesn't even mean anything anymore. Like, for example, at the very beginning, we see like Nobs and Colon kind of talking, because Nobby and Colon are kind of they really shine in this particular book, because they're the everymen, the men on the street who aren't super well educated. They are, they're blue collar workers, and they're doing their best, and they're not bad men. but they're uneducated, and they kind of have their ignorance and their own biases that they may not even know they have. And it's always biases in the abstract, like Pratchett talks about in Men at Arms, with this kind of like cultural like racism, where it isn't meant to be malignant or malicious. It's just like, well, this is just, the view of me and mine as we grew up. But as soon as they meet someone of that particular class in Men at Arms cases, dwarves and trolls, they're like, oh, well, they're not so bad, because it's just kind of being products of their surroundings. And we have that here with Colon and Nobbs. And Nobby says something like good about the Clatchians, like, oh, well, didn't they do this? And Colon's like, are you being unpatriotic, like accusing them of being unpatriotic for speaking well of the enemy? It doesn't matter if it's true. By acknowledging anything that the other side has, you are being unpatriotic. And that's what Thucydides talks about in his discussing the Peloponnesian War. Like, admitting that the other person has a point is the same as admitting that you're a coward or, a weak-willed man, or whatever the exact quote from Thucydides is. And so we have a lot of that, and really shown through Colon and Nobby. Speaking to that, as I said in my wrap-up, there's just a great quote about kind of the way that Colon thinks. Like, Nobby's like, are you sure it's like that? And he's like, it stands to reason, because Sergeant Colon had a broad education. He'd been to the school of my dad always said, the college of it stands to reason, and was now a postgraduate student at the University of what some bloke in the pub told me. Like, Colon didn't frickin' know. He just knows, oh, well, you know what they say. Like, no, Colon, no one knows what they say. He's just ignorant. And so from these two, we just see kind of this, like, cultural ignorance that the common man in Ankh-Morpork has. Colon at one point is trying to rationalize torture on the Clatchians. And it's not that he wants to torture them, because the word torture is like, no, of course not torture. But he's like, yeah, but if you just saw your best friend like die on the battlefield, and you capture this other guy, and you don't want to torture him, but maybe you just want to like rough him up a little bit, give him a nudge so that, sometime in 20 years time his leg starts hurting him and he remembers you, type thing. And the other like kind of more sophisticated guardsmen are like, dude, Colon, no, we don't torture, like that's not what we do. He's like, yeah, but. And you understand his rationale, like you saw your best friend get killed, like, and you want to make them pay. And Colon is that everyman, him and Nobby. And so we see a lot, and guys, we see this a lot nowadays. Like, it's okay when our side does something, but when someone points it out, like that the other guys are doing, no, it's not okay. It's not okay if they do it. It's only okay if we do it. And someone points it out, it's like, wait, aren't y'all doing this? Like, guys, look at political parties. Like, oh my gosh. You guys who follow politics, just freaking look at them. Look at them. It's the same. It's the freaking same. You can't be like, oh, well, they can't do that, but you're doing the same thing. Yeah, but it's okay when we do it. It's like that quote from Ben Franklin. Rebellion is always legal in the first person, our rebellion. It's only in the third person, their rebellion, that it becomes illegal. It's just so bizarre. Like, if you're kind of outside of that thing, it's just so bizarre to watch people justify. And when there's a common enemy, like, that's just what you do. You rally behind the people sticking it to your enemy. And that's what we see here with the Ankh-Morporkians and Sergeant Colon and Nobbs. So we get a lot more of the Patrician as well. The Patrician, as per usual, gets removed from office. This is every single guard's book. The Patrician is removed. And bizarrely, the Patrician ends up on the ground with Colon and Nobbs, and watching the Patrician, who is just this elite, the elite of the elite, like just brilliant, like brain, like always moving, like thinking 8 steps ahead. Seeing him paired with these two boneheads, Nobbs and Colon, like so much comedy, guys, comes out of that stuff. So aside from just like blind patriotism and jingoism, this book is about war and about the product of war, what war does to people, how war kind of takes over the public consciousness, how people profit from it. We see, just like nowadays, we see Ankh-Morporkians profiting from the war effort by selling weapons to the Clatchians, and that scene's hilarious when that guy's caught. Terry Pratchett just takes modern, like modern things and he just puts his own spin on it. So watching the weapons dealer get his ship commandeered when he's trying to like ship weapons over to the Clatchians, it's just freaking hilarious, because of course it's Corporal Carrot and Vimes that catch him. It's just funny stuff. But we also see how in war, like, how the people in power use kind of everybody else as political pawns, about how politics trumps everything. And that's the way now too. Politics trumps everything. It doesn't matter if you're a soldier, it doesn't matter if you're a cop, it doesn't matter if you're a noble, politics trumps everything. And everyone's just getting moved on the boards like pawns, because the things happening at the very, very top are above your pay grade, and they're trading things away that you may have something to say about, but guess what? You don't matter, because you're not politics. So we see a lot about the inner workings of Ankh-Morpork, kind of the old laws, to where when war is declared, Lord Rust, whom we've seen in all the other guards books, he's just one of the just annoying nobles. They say in the book that he's someone who pronounces here like, yeah, like, what are you doing? Yeah, he's one of those guys. What are you doing? Yeah. Like, there's no Y in here. And so when the country is at war, like, a state of emergency can be declared, and kind of the nobles kind of run things instead of the patrician. The constitution's kind of suspended, like ancient Rome when they had a dictator when the city was in danger. And these nobles have the power to levy soldiers, to conscript people into their military, kind of like the knights of old. And so Lord Rust kind of becomes the guy in charge, and he starts conscripting people into this army, and he's not interested in stopping the war, he's interested in destroying the Clatchians, which puts him at loggerheads with Vimes, who is determined to catch who is trying to start this war, because Vimes feels that this assassination attempt was an attempt to worsen relations between Clatch and Ankh-Morpork. And it's very important for you to know, as Vimes hammers home, Vimes is not a soldier. He is a cop. He does not think those are the same things. It is not his job to follow orders blindly. It is not his job to point his weapon and stab other people. It is his job to keep the peace and see that justice is done. So when Lord Rust says he's no better than a soldier, he's like, excuse me, I am not a soldier. I am a policeman. And continuing on with this theme, Pratchett explores why wars happen in this book, and why is it that nationalism brings out the worst in us. Why do normal people, like, who live ordinary lives, who are basically decent human beings, why does this incredible jingoism and nationalism, like, turn people into bad people? And we see that a lot. We see people we've seen before all of a sudden are like, I'm gonna go kill them. It's like, wait, what? Why? Well, because they're the enemy. But why, really? Oh, because they're the enemy. Do you know why they're the enemy? No, I'm just gonna go stab them with this stick I found. It's just bizarre. It's amazing what Pratchett is able to do with this Discworld backdrop. Because Pratchett doesn't just call attention to it. He makes it uncomfortable with the attention he calls to it. As there's one section where the diplomat is asking Vimes, like, hey, and it's a Clatchian diplomat, a Middle Eastern diplomat, and he asks Vimes, he's like, hey, what is this phrase that I keep hearing that people keep calling me? People keep saying this phrase to me, and he's Middle Easterner, and so you can imagine it's a pejorative, kind of like a racial slur. And Vimes gets really uncomfortable because this diplomat is asking him, and Vimes doesn't know if he's like, kidding him or not, and he's like, he's like, yeah, I keep hearing this, like, what does this mean? And so Vimes finally is like, well, I don't want to insult him by, if he knows, and he's just testing me. So Vimes is like, it's a racial slur. Like, it means this. And the diplomat's like, you know what? You're the first person who's been able to tell me what that means all day. I've asked like 7 people, and as soon as I ask them, they all, to a one, develop this horrible cough. As in, like, these are the people calling him this racial slur, but as soon as he's like, I'm sorry, what does that mean? They're like, because no one's willing to own up to the fact that they're being super racist. They're racist in the abstract. They can't be racist, they can't be practically racist. They have to be abstractly racist. Like, when it becomes real and when you're face to face with the guy you're, like, throwing a slur at, like, all of a sudden, like, You're not going to own up to that? Like, cowards. And so Vimes at least is able to, like, cop to his innate biases. He doesn't like Clatchians either, but he does stop his watch from using these slurs that he's like, guys, like, stop. Like, Vimes insists that the watch must be above the common populace. As they have before, naturally Vimes and Rust come into conflict because Rust is willing to send people, like, over to die, but not willing to do it himself because that's who freaking Rust is. And him and Vimes are bound to butt heads because Rust believes that, and he says, and I quote, war is a continuation of diplomacy by other means. And that's just not okay with Vimes. Like, Vimes does not believe that war should, like, you can't use other people's lives to get what you want. You just can't do it. And there's this great discussion between Rust and Vimes where Rust insists that the law isn't kind of some moral absolute. Like, Vimes believes that there is more, like, the law, capital L, is above something and it's something to be served. And Rust is like, no, that's not what the law is. The law is what I and other people in power say it is. I want to actually read this part because it's actually quite good. Because Vimes is asking him, like, what kind of law do you want me to enforce? The kind where you shout stop before you shoot, or the other kind? And Rust does not find this amusing at all. And he says, it seems to me that the streets are full of crimes, Commander. Unlicensed begging, public nuisances, but you seem to turn a blind eye. You seem to think you should have bigger ideas, but you are not required to have big ideas, Commander. You're a thief-taker, nothing more. Are you eyeballing me, Vimes? I'm trying not to turn a blind eye, sir. You seem to feel, Vimes, that the law is some kind of big glowing light in the sky, which is not subject to control, and you are wrong. The law is what we tell it to be. I'm not going to add, do you understand, because I know you understand, and I'm not going to try to reason with you. I know a rank bad hat when I see one. And this is just the difference between Vimes and the nobility. Vimes believes that the law is a virtue in and of itself. The law is not something that comes and goes, that you choose to enforce sometimes, that is just kind of relative to who you're dealing with. That's not what Vimes believes the law is. Vimes believes that there are crimes and there are criminals and people need to be punished. He's very similar to Carrot in this way, though they don't seem to be similar on the surface. Captain Carrot also believes in, like, punishing all crimes, but Carrot is very by the book. Like, someone had this infraction, the book says it's against the law, they should be punished for it, or should have consequences. Vimes is past, like, the book. Vimes believes in the law kind of above that, some kind of moral law that he just holds tight to, and anybody violating it must be brought down. Pratchett also talks about the dehumanization of the enemy, how it has to be us versus them in order for us to justify the stuff we're doing. Like, we have to think of them as them. We can't think of them as the same, like, as us. We can't think of them as people and fathers and mothers and children. Like, we can't think of them like that because then we can't kill them. And this is the same stuff that R.F. Kuang is dealing with in the Poppy War. Ren has to do the same kind of stuff. In order for her to be able to commit the horrible things that she does against the Muganese, she has to believe that they're all monsters. Like, not just the ones that are monsters. You have to dehumanize all of them. And finally, in Vimes' case, he draws this big dichotomy between him and a soldier because Vimes is a cop. He is commander of the watch house. He is nobility now with his marriage to Lady Ramkin, but he can never stop being a policeman. It is so ingrained in his blood that if he sees someone run, he's going to chase them. And we see that without that, with the prospect of that chase being taken away, Vimes is miserable. Vimes has policemen in his blood. He has to chase the criminal. He has to see justice done. He's unable not to. Vimes has to put things right. Bad guys have to be brought. He's like a dog that needs to chase something. In fact, they call him Vetinari's dog at one point. The thing about Vimes that I love the most, that speaks to me the most, and why Vimes is one of my favorite characters in all of fantasy, is because that Vimes' reverence for the law, his exalting of the capital L law. This means that no one is above it. There has to be a law. Vimes believes that there has to be a law, even for kings and even for nobles, even for the people in charge. Like, everyone has to be subject to the law, or else there's no point. He says that there must be policemen. even for kings. Our world needs that too, because sometimes sometimes it feels like there are no cops for kings. There are no policemen for the people at the top. There is nothing that anyone does for the people who are wealthy and powerful enough to make sure that nothing is done. And Vimes, and this is why I love Vimes, is Vimes cannot be bought. Vimes cannot be bribed. If we unleashed Samuel Vimes into the United States of America, we'd have some white-collar crime frickin' fixed, and we'd have it fixed fast. So, just the fact that Vimes believes, as most of us should, that no one is above the law, it just speaks to me. People fighting for justice, I love that stuff. So as always, Pratchett's prose is just amazing. The way he describes things, the word choice he uses, just his ability to turn a joke, just so like, almost blink and you miss it. I just want to talk about some of the funniest parts, or some of my favorite, I didn't put all of them, but some funny things that I found in this book. There's a part where Colon, again, is ignorantly talking about the things that the Clatchians invented, how like, oh yeah, they invented things with al, because, you know, they're Middle Eastern, so al, things with the prefix al are things they invented, like algebra and alcohol. He says that's how you can tell it's a Clatchian word or a Clatchian invention, because it has al. And this, again, this is straight from Colon's education of, yeah, what some bloke said, because that's stupid. And so, like, just a couple pages later, they're looking up at the stars, and Colon's like, you know, the Clatchians even invented astronomy. And Nobby helpfully goes, you mean altronomy? Because Nobby just, it's hilarious to me, because it completely misses the point. Like, Colon has just been saying, like, oh yeah, their inventions, you can tell because it starts with al. And then he says something that starts with as, and Nobby's like, oh, well, you must have, since the Clatchians invented it, they must start with al, so it's altronomy instead of astronomy. That's so stupid, and it's so funny to me. It's so funny to me. There's also this like petty thief named the Artful Nudger instead of the Artful Dodger from Dickens, and I don't know why I thought that's funny. There's also a woman named Denise and her brother named Denephew. That's so stupid. Oh my gosh, some of this stuff is just, I just crack up. Like, even reading it back over, I crack up. And between the Artful Nudger and this terrible barber called Sweeney Jones, who kills people on accident because he's just bad, he sneezes while he's like shaving people's face and like cuts their throats. Like, this is just kind of the pop cultural references that if you don't know who Sweeney Todd is, or you've never seen Oliver or heard of Oliver Twist, you're not gonna get that that's a play on the Artful Dodger and Sweeney Todd. But it doesn't matter. Like, even if you don't get that, it's like the books are still enjoyable. You don't have to understand all of these pop cultural references to get it. As I said, the more I read Discworld, the more I get. Every time I read it, I get something new, because I have expanded my pop cultural knowledge. There's one line from the Patrician that I think is pretty appropriate for all of us. And he said, "This made him an excellent confidant. After all, when you seek advice from someone, it's certainly not because you want them to give it. You just want them to be there while you talk to yourself." And isn't that true? How often are you actually asking advice from other people? But just that kind of like, just these tiny observations are just what make Pratchett so freaking brilliant. Some of this stuff, though, is like, it's even too British. There is a joke about Sweet Fanny Adams, which I literally had to look up. There's like some Latin that translates to Sweet Fanny Adams, and it just means nothing. It means like, screw all that. Like, the University of Sweet Fanny Adams means the University of who gives a crap. Like, and I didn't know that, and I had to look it up, because that's just a reference that's way too British for me. It started with like a murder in the 1800s of some little girl named Fanny Adams, and then it turned into British naval slang, meaning like a nasty like meat stew they didn't want to eat, and now it means, you know, whatever, who cares? And so there's just some stuff that you like, it's just too British for me. It's not too British for Posh Allen. Posh Allen got it, but I did not right away. Nobby over in Clatch is one of the funniest things in this. Like, Nobby taking on sexism, like, one of their disguises is he's a harem girl, and by Nobby adopting this harem girl disguise, he's like taking the cause of feminism upon his person, and is like saying all these things like, oh, well, why can't women do this? Why can't, oh, you're saying I can't do this because I'm a woman? Oh, that's not fair. And it's like Nobby, once he's dressed like a woman, all of a sudden he realizes the inherent sexism in their system, and he wants to like topple the patriarchy and, you know, give more rights to women. And it's just hilarious watching little knobs come to all these realizations. Also, we do get more in-depth in why people follow Carrot and why Carrot can kind of get anybody to do what he wants. Even people like deep dark thugs, like evil men, he can get them to apologize. And it's because everyone, like, you want to please Carrot, because Angua kind of describes it as, you know, when you're telling someone something and you're just telling them, like, you know, these just kind of details that, you know, this detail and that detail. Carrot doesn't just remember them. Like, you know how when someone's telling a story, and like probably with this review, you're just like, get over it, get on with it. When someone's telling you a story and you're like, yeah, I don't really need that detail. I didn't know what you were wearing. I don't know all this stuff. Carrot not only wants those details, he not only cares about those details, he actively takes an interest in those details. And so because of that, there's just this like energy that spills forth from Carrot that everyone's just kind of drawn to. And Pratchett, it's just brilliant in the way he describes everything. Like, Carrot is this force because Carrot he doesn't put a spell over people. People just want to do things for Carrot because Carrot genuinely cares about every single person that he meets. And so before wrapping this up, guys, I just want to read like a paragraph that just struck me as kind of like, I just really like the way Pratchett describes this, something about the night. The night is always old. He'd walked too often down dark streets in the secret hours and felt the night stretching away, had known in his blood that while days and kings and empires come and go, the night is always the same age, always eons deep. Terrors unfolded in the velvet shadows, and while the nature of the talons may change, the nature of the beast does not. Pratchett's just such a great writer. Like, I love that paragraph, just kind of indicative of the way that, just the imagery that Pratchett can concoct with his writing. So guys, I've talked a whole lot about Jingo. It is fantastic. If you're not reading the freaking Guards books, you absolutely should be. On the King Finn approval system, I give this book a superb minus. It isn't my favorite Guards book. I don't think I like it better than the first three, but I did really enjoy it. I definitely enjoyed it more than I read the last time, probably because I'm more kind of world-wise, and I understand like the politics of war way more than I did when I first read this before you know, I even graduated high school. Out of 5 stars, it's an easy 5-star. It is really hard for Pratchett to not be a 5-star. I'm coming up on Fifth Elephant, which I didn't like as much, I think, last time, so we'll see if that holds true. Guys, thank you so much for watching. As always, information about my Discord and my Patreon is down in the description, and I will see you guys next time. Wednesday, 1:13 p.m. Got called to the parade grounds on account of an attempted assassination of a diplomat. On account of an attempted assassination of an Porkian diplomat. Wednesday, 1:13 p.m. Got called to the parade grounds on account of an attempted assassination. What is assassination? You mean an assassination? What is a assassination? Assassination. Not two assassinations. Assassination. Wednesday, 1:13 p.m. Got called to the parade grounds on account of an attempted assassin. Oh my gosh.